All right. So I have been working, well, actually, let me get you set up in your first pose, and then I'll talk a little bit about where we're headed and what we're doing. So the first pose is going to be your choice. And I want it to be something that feels very kind and very gentle. So maybe it's one of your more favorite yin poses, or maybe it's something that's a little bit more on the restorative side. And just start to make your way there and get comfortable and start to get settled. And then as you do, I'll share with you the theme for tonight's class. As many of you know, I got started in kind of the 8 limbs, and then I just decided that I was going to keep going. So I reversed kind of back to the beginning, and I had meant to send you guys a little diagram of the 8 limbs, give you a little bit better concept of kind of what I'm putting out to you and what it is. But this is ahimsa, and it's the practice of nonviolence, and it falls under the yamas. And the yamas are kind of the ethical practice that we put out there in the 8 limb path. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But as you settle in, if you wish to practice the mudra, it's called Kapoda Mudra, and it's the gesture of the dove, and it's for cultivating nonviolence. And you bend the hands at the knuckles, and then bring the tips of the fingers and the thumbs together. So you actually have, it'd be almost like you were trying to hold a dove very gently in your hands. There's a lot of space there. And then just depending on where you're at, you can just rest that on your belly or rest it on your lap or maybe above your head, depending on where your arms are. And then just allow yourself a few moments to just start to settle in. And maybe your focus goes right to your hands if you're taking the mudra, right to those fingertips, the insides of those or sides of those thumbs that touch. And just acknowledging that energy that's generating there. And then before I set you off in a few moments of silence to really arrive onto your mat and into your practice, just draw your mind to your breath for a moment. Maybe deepening the breath, elongating the exhale, kind of slowing the heart rate down. It's activating your nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system. And then from your breath, maybe select your drishti, your focus point, or maybe you like to set an intention for your practice. Just a place to refocus the brain if the mind starts to take over. And then just allow your body time to relax and soften. Just beginning to gently deepen the breath, kind of drawing yourself back. I want you to take a few more moments in the pose that you are in right now. And now I want to think, taking you from a place kind of comfort that you're drawn to, I called it a place of kindness. Now I want you to think of a pose that you find a little bit more challenging, that presents maybe a little bit of difficulty to you. And it doesn't, it doesn't have to be severe. Maybe frog pose was an example if you have tighter hips. And when you feel ready for movement, I'm going to ask you to start to make your way there into whatever that pose is. And the reason that I ask that of you is to truly bring the practice of ahimsa, non-harming, right into your mat and yourself and your practice. It's very easy to think of not harming as in how we treat other things outside of us, how we treat other people, animals, how we approach life. And it's a pretty basic understanding. But ahimsa and non-harming also entails how we treat ourselves, our thoughts, how upset we get with ourselves for certain things. And how you practice on the mat is very, what do I want to say, reflective of kind of how you practice in life. So I guess I don't know what word I'm looking for. The reason I'm asking you to find something that's a little bit challenging is because I really want you to start to be aware of what thoughts start to arise, especially as you're here for a few minutes. And just kind of acknowledge how you handle that. If it's, if it's a little bit of discomfort, certainly not pain, how you approach that with yourself. I don't think oftentimes we give a lot of thought to actually how we really are with ourselves, our thoughts, our emotions. Maybe just take a few moments to kind of digest that and think about that as you work your way into this pose. Beginning again to deepen the breath, just kind of drawing your awareness back. And when you're ready, starting to find just a little bit of movement. And I'm not quite sure where everybody ended up, but I'm going to have everybody come onto their bellies and land in resting pose. So your elbows will be turned out to the side. Your hands are stacked. The forehead rests on the back of the hands. The legs are long behind you, wherever they feel comfortable. It can be wide off the edges of the mat, or even a little closer together. And start to let that go. Let that previous pose go. The practice of ahimsa is a nice reminder for us to be gracious towards not just ourselves, but our day and our day-to-day struggles and the things that we encounter most. It's the most charitable way that we can take care of ourselves is to just bring awareness and just kind of embracing that. And if you find negative emotions arising or negative thoughts, just let them go. I think yin is a really, really great place to concentrated place to practice some of these practices. Because in yin, not only kind of different than restorative, in yin, you're dealing with a lot of sensations that arise from the stretches that you're doing and the way that you're holding them. As good as they feel when you're done, they can be somewhat challenging or very challenging while you're in them. And then it's also the stillness and the quiet gives you an opportunity to really recognize what your mind is doing and what your mind is saying. And that recognition alone is huge. And that comes to play into karma, which is something I've been studying lately, but I won't go down that rabbit hole right now. But just recognizing that, positive thoughts with positive intentions create positive energy, create positive vibration. And that's definitely something you can take off of your yoga mat and out into your day. You have a few more moments here in your resting pose. So you can stay in stillness where you are, or if you want to bend your knees and kind of roll into the ankles and toes, you can, or maybe windshield wiper the feet, or draw circles with the feet, just working into the hips and the knee joints a little. And then from this resting pose, you have two options. So we're going to come into half frog pose on the right side. So from your resting pose, you can leave your head down, your forehead right on the back of that hand, and just start to bring that right knee up towards the right elbow. And I know it's kind of hard to see in the screen because I'm on the opposite side, but if you want to open that hip up a little bit more, you can slide a blanket or a block underneath that knee. Now, if you want a little bit more, I don't want to say challenge, but if you want to change the pose a little and add the low back into it, You can rotate the elbows and elevate yourself up on your forearms. So you're in Sphinx pose, half Sphinx and half frog. It just depends if you want to change it up just a little bit. If you're taking Sphinx pose, just remember to lift on that place between your shoulder blades so that you're not dumping into your shoulders. And then you have the chin to adjust the compression in the low back. And then wherever you end up, just allowing everything to soften and relax and continue to open. If you found yourself drifting off, go ahead and bring your focus back to your body, back to the mat. And if you've taken Sphinx pose, I'm going to have you rotate the elbows, stack the palms, and release the forehead to the back of the hands. And then I'm going to have everyone slowly start to bring that right leg back long to meet the left. Everybody resting for a moment, or everybody pausing for a moment in resting pose. And maybe just draw the attention right into the body. And maybe you've noticed a little bit of a different sensation on your right side than you do on your left side with the opening of that hip. And that may also depend what everybody chose for their two previous poses that we did, since those were they weren't they were self-choice. Depends on what you did. And then from here, we're going to come into half frog now on the left side. So you're going to draw that left knee now up towards that left elbow, placing that blanket or support underneath that knee if you did so on the other side, and you want to create a little bit more sensation, a little bit more opening. And then you have the same option here to come back into Sphinx if you wish. If you did it on the right side and you don't want to do it on the other side, then you don't have to. And if the eyes open, maybe go ahead and let them gently close. And then allowing the attention to draw right into the body, right into the focus point. And then just allowing the body to soften into that. Beginning to bring your attention right into the moment that you're in. If you're elevated on your forearms into Sphinx Pose, go ahead and start to rotate the elbows out to the side and stack the palms. Let the forehead rest. Let the shoulders rest. And then I'm going to have everybody bring that left leg back to meet the right, coming out of that half frog. And everybody just finding their midline on their belly. Setting that energy, those energy lines that we opened up in the hips, just letting that flow. And just allowing the body a moment to digest that half frog pose. And you're going to start to rotate the elbows towards the rib cage. Palms are going to come underneath the shoulders and then press into the palms. Lift yourself up to your tabletop. Take a moment here and just come through a few rounds of cat-cow, especially if you took that Sphinx pose. Just want to counter stretch a little from all that holding that you did, especially if you took it on both sides because you were there for a long time. And then getting ready to come into our next pose, which is a little variation on child's pose. And you're going to probably want a blanket handy. depending. So from your tabletop, I'm going to ask you just to widen your knees. Now, if you really prefer a very wide knee child's pose, maybe you're going to widen your knees a little bit more. If you typically don't take a wider knee child's pose, just bring your knees just outside of your hips. And then keeping your arms where they are and palms on the mat. Start to shift the hips back towards the heel. We're going to take a little spinal twist with this. So you're going to take the right hands and you're going to thread it underneath the left. So you're rounding through or twisting through the spine, coming down on that right shoulder and the right side of the head. And that's a great place to have a blanket. And then the left arm, so it's a little different than the traditional thread the needle that I teach in like a form of vinyasa style class. Just let the left arm rest. Just let it lay on the floor. So you're going to feel a stretch in that right shoulder, a little twist in the spine, and an opening in the hips. And then closing your eyes. Notice any places that you're clenching or holding on to any tension, and then try to let that soften. There's a lot going on in this pose. A lot of benefits to this pose. So allow yourself to take advantage of that. As you're here, just reminding yourself of the practice of ahimsa. If any thoughts start to arise while you're here, anything negative that's making its way to the surface, just send that negativity, send that negative thought some good positive energy. And then just send your mind right back to your focus point. Don't linger on it. Just acknowledge it, send it kindness, and then just move right back to where you are, right back into your pose. Deepening the breath and then beginning to bring that left palm underneath the left shoulder. Gently just leaving the hips kind of where they are. Begin to press the torso up and then unravel that right arm. And then you might find that you want to roll it out a little bit. Just come into a couple of arm circles there. And then if you found that your hips kind of shifted to one side or the other, being in that spinal twist, kind of bring yourself back to alignment. And then you're going to place the right palm on the mat and you're going to just come into the other side. So thread that left arm underneath the right, rotating through the spine, and then coming down onto the left shoulder and the left side of the head. Coming into the pose, starting to prepare for movement, and then beginning to bring the right palm underneath the right shoulder, and then slowly start to press yourself up, unravel that left arm, and then take a few circles there. Move the blanket, if you used one, off to the side, and then plant the palms on the mat and start to lift the hips up, bringing the knees in, coming back in traditional tabletop. From here, walk the palms forward just a little bit, and let's shift the hips towards the mat. Let's just stretch those hips out, come into seal pose. You can put a little micro bend in the elbows to kind of alleviate some of that pressure on the low back if you wish. And then go ahead and start to shift the hips back enough that you can turn yourself around and come onto your sit bones. We're going to make our way into a couple forward folds because before we make our way onto backs, and we are going to come into a Dragonfly Pose. You're going to make your way onto those sit bones and you're going to extend the legs out long to the side. So the feet are going to end up off of the mat. These forward folds are a good place to have bolsters or blocks or extra blankets if you need. We're going to start on the right side. So kind of press yourself into your fingertips to lengthen yourself out long, and then square your shoulders off towards that right foot. Now, even before you find your forward fold, if you have a lot of tightness in the back of that leg, you can fold a blanket up and put it under that right leg. And then you're going to take that nice tall spine, all that length you created, and then you're going to round through the spine, forward folding over that right leg. So as the forehead comes forward, that's where you can stack some blocks, roll up a blanket for a little bit of support. And then when you get there, remembering to soften and relax the arms. Just taking a moment to make sure that you're not straining or clenching or holding on to anything. You just want to let yourself soften. So as little distraction as you can, and maybe even using your arms to get there. Gently start to bring the top of the head up towards the ceiling. Maybe even keep the eyes closed if you close them. Sit yourself up nice and tall. Really lift out of, especially that low back. And then you are simply going to now square yourself off, square your shoulders off with that left leg. And then take any supports that you use there over to that side. And then maintaining that nice long spine, use that long spine to now forward fold over top of that left leg. Just finding your inhale, finding your breath, and then using that breath to very gently start to bring the top of the head up towards the ceiling, taking a moment to come out of that forward fold. When you come up, square the shoulders off, kind of back over top of the hips where they belong. Pause for another moment. Then you're just going to take the feet and you're going to bring them together, coming into caterpillar pose. So if you used a folded blanket underneath your knees in the dragonfly pose, you might want to bring that then underneath both knees. And then depending whether you did or not, take a moment to shift the hips back and forth and find those sit bones. And then you're back into the spine. From those sit bones, draw your attention all the way up the spine. Sit yourself up nice and tall, and then round in, finding your forward fold right over top of your thighs, between the thighs and the torso. Space for support, depending on what you feel like you need. And then again, just consciously relaxing everything right into that pose. Feet are soft, legs are soft, belly's soft, your jaw is soft. A little spot between your between your eyebrows is nice and soft. Just depending on where your focus ended up. Just bring it back, recognizing that you're in caterpillar pose. And then let that focus move to the top of the head as you start to draw yourself back upright. And then when you get there, maybe shift yourself so that your fingertips are behind you, and then press into the fingertips, lift up out of the low back, pull the shoulder blades together for a moment. You can find a little bit of movement. You can even windshield wiper the feet if you wish. And then you can start to move any supports that you used over to the side. And before you make your way onto your back, I'm going to have you take your blanket and prepare it, or unless you have a couple of blocks or a bolster and that's what you like to use, we're gonna use it for supported bridge pose and to stretch the hip flexors. So kind of set yourself up for that. And then depending on where you ended up on your mat, you can slide your sit bones forward and then slowly recline down onto your spine. And just take a minute here And just allow the head first to kind of acclimate to being reclined, but then it's in the hips, just adjusting, kind of moving side to side enough, and then maybe even shift the pelvis back and forth instead of side to side, and try to release that lumbar spine a little so that it can soften into the mat. And then moving your way a little further up, tuck the shoulder blades under the chest, creating a little expansion with the collarbones across the sternum, and then a little tuck in the chin so the back of the neck is long. And then when you feel situated with the soles of the feet on the mat and the knees bent, you're going to press into your feet, lift your hips up, and then slide that blanket or that support that you prepared underneath the pelvis, a little bit of the low back, and then set the pelvis back down. And just for a couple of rounds of breath, just as a little counter stretch from all that forward folding that we did. And we're going to extend the legs out long, one, then another. In some practices, this is called Pontoon Pose. I think they have a lot of different names, sometimes too many for all the same poses. And then allow yourself to relax, especially in the belly and the thighs, and let that opening happen through the front of the hips. A little counter stretch in the spine, a little extension. Came through a lot of flexion and some twisting, so this is just a little bit of counter pose. I'm going to stay here for another whole minute. So at any point, depending on how high you have your hips elevated, if it really starts to get too much through the hip flexors, you can bend the knees and bring the soles of the feet back to the mat. Otherwise, just enjoy all of that opening through the anterior side of the body. And then if you stayed with your legs extended, just very gently, maybe one at a time, start to bring the knees back up towards the ceiling. Now take notice that if that shifted something within the neck, just check back in with it. Make sure that the back of the neck is long. Sometimes the extending of the legs can slide us just a little bit. So that's gonna don't want to create any compression in the neck. And then widen the feet a little to maybe even a little wider than the hips or to the edges of the mat, and then let the knees fall towards each other. Just allowing everything to relax. This has a bit of more of a restorative intention. And just keeping the eyes closed right where you are. Start to widen the knees just a little. Walk the feet back in so they're somewhere in alignment with the hips. And then press into the feet, pick the hips up, remove that support from underneath, and then place the pelvis back on the mat, and then bring the knees into the chest. Take a gentle squeeze, release the low back, maybe rock side to side. And then as you're here, just take a moment to think about your Savasana. And I'm going to ask you to think about it in the way that I had you think about that very first pose that you did at the beginning of class. I want you to, or I'm going to ask you to take your Shavasana in a way that you feel is very gentle and very kind to you. And then eventually, if you took that rocking motion, you go ahead and start to let that go. And then start to make your way towards the closing of your practice. And maybe loving kindness is adding a little extra support underneath the back of the head or covering yourself up. And then when you get there, whatever that is, just remember to take that settling breath, that nice deep inhale through the nose. Exhaling out of parted lips, just letting everything go. And we'll be here to bring you back when it was time. As you gently begin to deepen your breath, drawing your awareness back, to ask you to think of one thing that you love about yourself, that you like about yourself, that you hold dear about yourself. And then take a moment of gratitude for that, whatever rose to mind. And maybe more than one thing. That would be really great if it was, there was more than one thing that you thought of. And have gratitude in that, because the practice of ahimsa, the practice of compassion and kindness, it begins at home. It begins with you and in your heart, with yourself. And from there, you can take it from your heart then and spread it out amongst others, those around you, the people you encounter in your day. And then just a moment of gratitude, of course, for yourself, for your practice, for carving a moment out of your day just for you. And I have immense gratitude for you for sharing that carved out moment of time that you created, sharing it with me. I honor the love, the light, the truth, and the beauty within each and every one of you, because it is also within me. I hope you do have a wonderful evening. Namaste.